Moloko, a lot of issues that have been touched on today, and there really isn't much time for the ANC to make sure that it delivers on these big promises that it's made in this January 8th statement, because elections are literally just a few months away, and so the task for the ruling party is a big one.
Well, that is very correct. I mean, if there's anything the African National Congress is good at, is to make promises after promises. Of course, the viewers can make an assessment for themselves in terms of whether they believe there is any commitment, and also there's delivery in all the commitments the ANC has been making. But before we even get into the speech by the president, I want us to talk first about what the General Secretary of the South African Communist Party, Mr. The SACP, I forget his name, I'm sorry, it's been a long day, but Solima Baila, I thank you. Prof. JJ Tabane, the SACP has always been talking about reconfiguration of this alliance, and they also previously threatened to even pull out of this tripartite alliance and go on their own. Are we ever going to see them really committing or making good on their threats?
We can't write them off while they're still alive, but so far the track record has been bad. The issue about going it alone is a standing threat. So Ramaphosa was saying it's a standing resolution that they would explore that to be able to go into the polls by themselves and assert themselves and so on. And part of what generated that threat is the whole issue of the failure to reconfigure the alliance. What does this mean? They feel that they are just a bridesmaid, really. The ANC makes the decisions and they just follow without questioning. They are excluded out of major decisions. If you look at, for example, the economic policy, they were critical of even the most recent economic policy that was released, I think, by Tito Mboweni 2 years ago. Right? You would think that something like that, right, learning from the whole issue of gear and how that was also a unilateral thing by the ANC, they won't do it again. So it's quite clear that the SACP and COSATU, for that matter, must do something more drastic than threats about making sure that this alliance actually is reconfigured to take them into account. That's what it means. Yeah. Forget about the big name or big word, reconfigure. The alliance is alliance by name only at the moment. And the ANC president, you will see, it was a very short paragraph in this speech. He didn't say how it's going to be reconfigured. He didn't give time frames. He only talked about a summit, an energy summit and so on. And the deputy president just now in that impromptu press conference also spoke about the fact that there'll be a summit. But this will be probably the umpteenth summit between the alliance people, which decisions of the previous summits have been ignored. Yeah.
Prof, let's come to the president of the ANC. He did say that there has to be clear task or role on how they, as the governing party, are going to address the pertinent challenges that are confronting the country. Surely this was a fantastic platform for him, the whole of the country watching him, to outline at least in more detail. Was this a missed opportunity? Because where I am seated, I'm still not educated in terms of how they are going to be specifically addressing the key issues that this country is confronted with, except to say that we must address the issue of load shedding, for instance.
Yeah. Well, if he gave us detail, he would be repetitive of what he said at the previous SONA, at the previous January 8, and so on. Right? The reality is, if you look at the 5 priorities that they outlined in last year's January 8, you know, it was not unfair to say none of it has been achieved, at least not to a significant point. What would have made this particular January 8 useful is to go to those 5 and say, under number 1, we achieved the following 2, we achieved, here we didn't achieve, we're going to do. So all they did was to create a new shopping list. You know, it's a 9-point plan now. We're used to these plans over the years, 12-point plan, 4-point plan, whatever it is. Unfortunately, even if we wanted to be as optimistic as we like, the reality is there's absolutely nothing new. Right? We picked up one or two interesting things. For example, I was saying to Mr. Goge earlier that one of the frustrations of the country is lack of implementation. So deployees of the ANC go to government, and then the ANC members themselves are not able to hold them accountable. You'll be surprised actually when we meet normal ANC members here, they're saying, oh no, please ask this question for us. They shouldn't be. They are in the ANC. They should be asking those questions with platforms being created for them to be able to quiz and interrogate progress on ideas. So what came out of the speech there, which I think is interesting if implemented, is that they're saying if you are deployed into government as an ANC member, you must annually give a report of progress on the mandate you are given. I think if I took away just one thing out of this whole thing, if they implement that, they will probably not have to then wait for 5 years to see that they have failed, like we see here in Mangaung, where the town is in shambles.
Well, there's a minister in the presidency responsible for evaluation and monitoring. I'm assuming, in fact, the president has said so himself, that the ministers have signed contracts. But of course, we have never seen sight of this or of those contracts. But I want to talk about him saying they are envisaging the ANC of the future. They want to kind of like have an idea of how the ANC will look like, say, in the next 10 years. An admission, perhaps, that they can no longer rely on the liberation narrative, that they will have to capture the minds, particularly of young people, whom you cannot really tell about Nelson Mandela.
It's the most honest thing that he has said in a long time, right? The ANC, unfortunately, has run out of ideas. They've admitted this themselves. If you look at the last January 8th statement, they say ANC is very good at what we call self-introspection and what, but not good at saying, what are we going to do about it? You understand? Right now, the voters are less interested about the ANC of 10 years from now. They are interested in an ANC in a year and a half who can promise them something that can change their vote. We've seen how they voted in the local government elections, ANC at 45%. I know that this doesn't translate into the national election, but it's a big question mark hanging over the ANC now. They should be talking about the ANC of today. How is that ANC saving the people? How is that ANC not disappointing so much? To throw the javelin in 10 years from now, it's a mess in terms of what the ANC hopes to do to reverse the current trend of electoral misfortune.
Yeah. Finally, we were hoping that the Deputy President of the ANC, Paul Mashatile, will kind of like, give us an idea in terms of what the plan is now that, this jamboree is now behind them. The expectation is that the President will possibly reshuffle his National Executive Council cabinet, and there's an expectation that he will become number 2 citizen. What do you see his role really becoming, not only if he goes into government and become the deputy president, but even within the ANC? I mean, we saw him after the president had spoken, taking a walk around the stadium, making an appeal, going on a charm offensive at the people who are here at the stadium. Did you read anything out of that?
Not really, because it was an accident that we were walking around, because we were at a noisy place and we had to find another quiet corner. Yeah. So I wouldn't really pin that on him. It would be unfair. Yeah. However, the campaigners of Paul Mashatile are very clear. I don't think they are confused about what they want. They want him to be president sooner rather than later. President Ramaphosa has a big question mark hanging over him. And those who lost at Nasrec are going to make his life a misery. Remember, he already said he wanted to go and resign. Right? He almost did not make it to the conference on his own volition. Paul Mashatile is a step away, a heartbeat away from being the president, and he's going to grab it with both hands. The fact that he addressed us here instead of the president also gives a big question mark. We don't understand why the president can't talk to us today. He'll talk to us tomorrow at 10 o'clock. In fact, there was a suggestion that we should follow him to Cape Town to talk to him there, which is it contradicts already the priorities they've set. One of the 9 priorities is that they must communicate effectively. Right? They didn't communicate with us to say, no, we won't be talking to the president today. Well, we must find a way, impossible as it may be, to be in Johannesburg tomorrow at 10 o'clock and talk to him there. Paul Mashatile has already said his bit. I've warned you in the morning to say, please lower your expectations. There were questions that says we thought he can give us a program of action. He already admitted they can't, because they must still go to Lekgotla to thresh out what exactly is going to happen. So we have to look forward to the government Lekgotla, the Lekgotla itself of the ANC, as well as the SONA, to try and find some detail of what these 9 priorities how they will translate into concrete things that can appeal to the people of this town, and who are seeing a municipality in dysfunction, who have the leadership of the ANC itself in dysfunction, and all of that.
Prof, I beg pardon. I know I said this was the last question, but I have the very last question. It's interesting you're saying that the president's detractors will really not rest, will want to give him hard time as much as possible, and I presume you were referring to within the ANC, those who remain as National Executive Committee members. But yesterday we heard, interestingly, Fikile Mbalula, the Secretary General, when he was addressing the Peter Mokaba lecture, saying that they are aware that there are some members, comrades, who are unhappy, and they are now forming political parties with the aim of reducing the ANC's hegemony and majority. Even question asking, saying, go and ask them why they are so angry. Now, do you really even see, looking at the context wherein there was COPE, there was the PAC, the EFF, all of them happened, the IFP, you can even say, they are the offshoots of the African National Congress. Do you really give them a chance, those who may want to step out of the ANC, to contest President Cyril Ramaphosa and bring him down?
Not if it's the likes of Carl Niehaus and so on. I don't think people are going to rush to join a splinter of that nature. These guys are bitter. They lost an election. They lost a conference. Ramaphosa beat them. However you may think of it, I mean, I think it's a bad idea that he didn't account on Pala to his own highest issue-making body. I think that's very bad. But that's not going to automatically translate into Ramaphosa resigning or stepping aside or whatever it is, right? They have to work harder on the ground. I believe that these splinters are not working. None of them have gone past 10% if they try to do this. They have got to consolidate. I've said this many times. You take all the opposition from IFP, UDM, COPE, EFF, and so on, and even the DA. If they are serious about 2024 being different, they've got to consolidate, because the way it is now, the ANC will just laugh its way back into parliament, even if they get 51%, because there's no consolidation because if you consolidate the opposition, you're able to say to the country, listen, we need something new. Doesn't matter what it is. But for now, the ANC has to just go and sort out this 10 years plan, and then maybe we'll see them after 10 years. But for now, we need something fresh, something new that can take the country out of the mess it's in, the economic mess, social cohesion mess, and so there seems to be if you like, a disappearance of ideas. You remember at the policy conference, my favorite minister, the minister Zulu, talked about chemical castration out of everything. You thought these people were sitting for 5 days coming up with serious things. She talks about something that's completely at odds with even the ANC policy itself. You would remember, that the what you call the diagnostic report has told us many times that of what is wrong in the ANC, and to give another analysis like we've seen today or last year this time will not take you out of the morass. So that's a gap there for the opposition to say, how do we fill that gap, right? And I think it may be a good thing for the country. People are talking about coalitions, and that discussion is stepping up. But you can't talk about coalitions if the opposition does badly. Who are they going to coalesce with? They're coalescing the opposition benches. They've got to consolidate so that discussion on coalition makes sense in 2024, because the NC, unfortunately, seems to need a break.
Yeah. The fragmented opposition parties must consolidate, so says Professor JJ Tabane. But the million-dollar question is, considering that these opposition parties are coming from completely different ideological backgrounds, yes, they may consolidate as we have seen them doing in the local municipalities, but is it possible that they can work together even after clubbing together to remove the ANC? Are they going to agree on major issues, the budget, for instance? Who becomes the minister of a particular portfolio and who becomes even the president? But it seems to be the reality that as the country, considering the fact that the ANC seems to be losing support, if you look at the data for the previous elections, it seems as if we are entering into that uncharted territory, and having witnessed what is happening in the local government sphere, the pandemonium that really is taking place there. Let's brace ourselves, I guess, as South Africans beyond 2024 to see what really is going to happen.